everybody. We're going to go ahead and get things started. My name is Jenna Nilo. I am the Director of Marketing and Outreach with Illinois Digital Educators Alliance. Thank you so much to everybody who has joined us here today, and the numbers keep going up, so as they continue to join, thank you all for being here today. In just a minute, I'm going to turn things over to Kelsey with Eduplanet and Jay McTighe, and we are going to go over virtual curriculum design, timely units for COVID-19. So Jay has some great social studies and science units to share with us today. But before I turn things over to them, just a few quick housekeeping items. First of all, please go ahead and if you don't mind keeping yourself muted throughout the presentation and then keeping your video off. That will put the spotlight video on Jay as he does his presentation. And we won't hear everybody's background noise. So if you please keep yourself muted, that would be fantastic. In addition to that, I am recording today's session. So I will make the recording available to everybody who registered for the session, either later tonight or first thing tomorrow morning. I will send you the recording, the chat file, and then any resources that are shared out today. And that will come in an email to everybody who registered. We will also place that recording on the IDEA YouTube channel, which then links to our website as well, where you can find all of our Wednesday webinar recordings. So that will be coming to you tomorrow. So let me think about that. Also, if you are looking for PDHs or credit of completion credit for joining us today, Illinois educators, we do offer that one PDH for being here. Anybody else who needs just a completion credit, a certificate of completion, we will provide that as well. So we do require, however, in-person attendance, live attendance. So at the end of today's session, in that chat file, I am going to, or in that chat window, I'm going to place the link for that to go ahead and fill out the forms to begin that process. So just, I will mention it when I do that, but please keep an eye in the chat window at the end of the session today for that as well. Speaking of the chat file, we do welcome interaction throughout the presentation, questions, all that good stuff, comments. So please use that chat window. Again, if you keep yourself muted, then we won't be talking over Jay, but if you use that chat window, then we will make sure that we monitor that and get all the questions that we can possibly answer today answered for you. So I think that's about it. Without further ado, I'm going to turn things over first to Kelsey, who's going to introduce herself, and then we will hear from Jay. Jay, Kelsey, thank you so much for being here today. We're excited. This was a good one.
Awesome, Jenna, and big thanks to Jenna and a huge shout out to IDEA for putting this together. I'm Kelsey Mitchell, so I am our Director of Sales and Customer Success at Eduplanet21. So I'm really here just to introduce Jay today and kind of kick off what our role is in the webinar. We really do think that this content is very, very timely, especially given the amount of folks that were able to register for the webinar today. And we do hope that you enjoy Jay's presentation and really learn a lot from that content. Before I turn it over to Jay, I am going to give you just a very quick overview of Eduplanet21. What we do and the role that we're going to play in the webinar. Just give me just a second and I'll kind of convert over here. So what we do, it's very simple. So we are a curriculum management platform. Our platform contains modules that really help to support your curriculum design efforts. Especially it is designed around understanding by design, which I'll talk to here in just a couple minutes. But we can also support a lot of your professional learning initiatives, which makes us kind of an integrated curriculum management platform. And we'll talk more about that on the next slide here. But why we do it is probably even more important. You're all probably very familiar with Bob Marzano's work. And Bob said that a guaranteed and viable curriculum is the #1 school level factor in increasing student achievement. Our team is here to increase student achievement, and that is the bottom line. And all the work that we do around that is designed to work towards that goal. We really do believe that our platform can help you achieve that as well. So the role that we'll be playing kind of in the webinar, you'll see little glimpses of the platform here and there, and I will give you a quick demo here at the end, just a couple minutes. But this graphic kind of gives you a quick summary. So the core of what we do is curriculum design, and that is around a product that we call Unit Planner. And Unit Planner is based on the Understanding by Design framework. So it really does help to schools and districts that are using UBD to really support that work. It is the core of what we do, and that's what we're really passionate about, and it makes it very easy to create, share curriculum units, and then there's a lot of analysis features there, both for teachers and leaders as well. Kind of supporting that work is what we call our professional learning institutes, or PLUS institutes. So we work with a collection of authors and experts in education. Jay has worked with us to create an institute specifically around understanding by design, really breaking down the 3 stages and what the big ideas of UBD are. And it really just allows you an area to collaborate on those courses with folks not only within your school or district, but around the globe, participate in discussions as well as resources. So again, I'll be sure to give you a very quick overview here at the end. But again, the reason we're here is because our platform really is designed to support your work, especially if you are using UBD within your school or district. So without further ado, I will turn it over to you, Jay.
Okay, thanks, Kelsey. Let me see if I can share my screen, and welcome to everyone who is here. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you're viewing from. So this is a short time frame we have, so I'm going to get right into it. We've heard the welcome and introduction. I'm going to begin with an overview of the key ideas of the Understanding by Design framework. I know for many of you, UBD is not new, but not everyone is familiar. So I'm going to start with an overview and then take a look at how we've used Understanding by Design as a framework for planning 3 units tied to the pandemic, the COVID-19 phenomena that we're experiencing. It illustrates an important point. The curriculum should be a living entity, and COVID-19 was not in any standards, it's not in textbooks, and yet it would probably be educational malfeasance not to address it with students because it's such a part of our collective reality. So I'll share 1 or more of those units with you. Then I'll turn it back to Kelsey for a preview of some of the features of the planner and the overall platform that Eduplanet has built. As mentioned, please feel free to enter questions into the chat box. Given the number of people and the short time frame, I can't promise that we'll address all questions, but as time permits, I'll check the chat box and we'll get back to you on that. So let me begin with an overview of Understanding by Design. Understanding by Design was initially published 22 years ago, believe it or not, but I happen to think that is perhaps more timely today than it was when it was originally authored. The 2 big ideas of Understanding by Design are contained in its title. We propose that modern education should focus on preparing students to transfer their learning. As you know, transfer means that you can take something you've learned and apply it to new situations, ones that perhaps you've never seen before. That's transfer. And if the pandemic has illustrated anything, with a sobering reminder that we're preparing students for an increasingly complex, interconnected, and unpredictable world. Rote learning of factual information is an insufficient preparation for a modern education. Our contention is straightforward. We should plan our curriculum and our teaching and our assessments backward from transfer goals that specify what we want students to be able to do with their learning in new situations. That's transfer. But think about it, you can't transfer something that you don't understand. If all you have is rote learning, all you can do is give back what was told you in the way it was told. But transfer requires understanding, because understanding something deeply enables you to apply it and to adapt it. And so that's been the long-time focus of Understanding by Design. Focus our curriculum, plan our teaching, and derive our assessments from the goals of understanding and transfer. Now, an important point here, to highlight that understanding and transfer are our focus areas, in no way is meant to suggest that we don't care about knowledge or basic skills will just happen on their own. Not true. You can't do anything without foundational knowledge and basic skills. But those should be considered the floor, not the ceiling of a modern education. So building on a foundation of basic knowledge and skills we're really focusing teaching, curriculum, and instruction around, or assessment and instruction around understanding and transfer. The second big idea in understanding by design is by design. And this is not a new idea, but it's a powerful and important way of planning curriculum. You may know that Grant Wiggins and I have proposed a 3-stage backward design process. Stage 1 of backward design is where we identify desired results. Well, of course, anybody planning anything should have goals or results in mind. But in understanding by design, you'll see, if you don't already know it, we have some particular goal types that we want to focus on in stage 1. Stage 2 is actually, in some ways, the heart of this planning process, because in stage 2, we're asked to think like assessors and ask a straightforward question. If these are the goals we're after, or the outcomes we seek, or the results we wish to achieve for students, what evidence of learning, skill proficiency, and understanding do we need? And we think about assessment before we get too invested in planning instruction and actually doing our teaching. Stage 3 is where day-to-day planning occurs, where we create lesson plans. But stage 3 follows stages 1 and 2. As I mentioned, this is not a new idea, and any of you who are curriculum geeks will recognize Ralph Tyler's 3 fundamental questions for planning curriculum. And interestingly, they are backward design questions, and his sequence is backward design. In other words, this is not a new idea. But what we have found is when teachers really understand and use backward design in their planning and really target understanding and transfer, not just covering a lot of stuff, it can help avert 2 potential problems that we sometimes see in planning and teaching. One is indicated on the screen. In my experience, this is more widespread at the elementary and maybe middle school levels, something I call activity-oriented curriculum, where when we plan activities, and the activities may be interesting, hands-on, engaging for kids. But if it's not clear why the kids are doing the activities, or we have no evidence other than they were engaged, toward what end? We found that when teachers, particularly in the primary and elementary grades, really understand backward design, it's much more likely that their activities will be purposeful and will have evidence of their effect. A second potential problem that backward design can avert is more frequently observed at the secondary and collegiate levels, something we lovingly call coverage. Translated as a teacher is racing through the pacing guide to cover all the grade level standards, or marching through page by page in the textbook, hoping to finish it by the end of the school year. With all due respect to the challenges of secondary and collegiate teaching, any of you at those levels know there's a huge volume of content for every subject and every course. But with all due respect, my contention is our job is not to cover the curriculum. If anything, it's to uncover, explore the big ideas, the transferable processes, because those are the ones that have legs, have staying power, and will equip kids to apply their learning in the future. In understanding by design, we have a planning template. The one that I'll show you and you'll see in the software is a unit planner, not an individual lesson planner. The template is simply a graphic organizer, but it has a few virtues. One, it models backward design thinking. And so just like a good graphic organizer with kids, it helps you think, and it becomes a mental template. I've had many teachers say to me, you know, once I learned UBD, that's just how I think. It's not about filling in boxes on a template. If that's your view, then you misunderstand. Backward design is a way of thinking, a way of prioritizing curriculum, and there's an inherent logic to it. So the 3 stages of backward design are reflected in the planner, and I'll be going through some of the key ideas in each of the stages, and then we'll look at 1 or more units created around the pandemic topic using UBD. And then Kelsey will show you some of the interesting features of the software that's built around the UBD planner. So let's have a look at the planner, and I want to point out one subtle but important notice. Notice on the planner, and this is now stage 1 of backward design, where we're thinking about desired results. There's a place for established goals on the side. Established goals will include standards that states have developed, or national standards for that matter. But established goals might also include anything related to a mission of a school district or a school. For example, some districts, some schools have adopted a portrait of a graduate or a profile of a graduate. Some schools have identified so-called 21st century skills. Some schools have identified habits of mind as important to their work. Religious schools have mission related to religious education. All of these are established goals outside of individual teachers, and thus they would be placed in this section of the template. But just having a whole variety of goals doesn't bring to bear some of the differences in those goals, and those differences are noteworthy. So that's what you'll see in the main body of the template. We've identified what we call long-term transfer goals. As a question, what do you want students to be able to do with their learning in the long run? Long-term transfer goals are derived from standards or mere mission, but typically they would be agreed to by a school or a district, as opposed to every teacher coming up with their own for every unit. Because when you say planning with the end in mind, we want to have a long-term end, and that's transfer. The second category has to do with meaning making. This is where we specify what we want students to come to understand. These are the big ideas, both of content and of process, because you have to understand in order to transfer. We frame the desired understandings through what we call essential questions, open-ended questions that are meant to be thought-provoking for students. And by exploring the questions over time, we want to develop and deepen their understandings. I like to think of the understandings and questions as like two sides of a coin. Understandings is what we want students to come to. Essential questions is a doorway. By exploring the question again and again, they will deepen their understanding. And then we have knowledge and skills. These are the more specific and discrete objectives, often found in grade level standards. What do you want students to know and be able to do? Those are the basics. Those are the foundational elements that we want students to acquire. We call those acquisition goals. Now, this is a slightly different visual, or it is a different visual of the same ideas. And I want to make the following point. Goal clarity by the teacher and helping the students understand the goals and their differences is really a critical part of UBD. And if you think about it, you can categorize virtually any goal in terms broadly of three categories. There are knowledge and skills that we want kids to acquire. There are larger conceptual goals, big ideas of content, and also processes. And these include 21st century skills and habits of mind. And we put those under the meaning-making category. And finally, there's transfer, which I contend should be our ultimate goal, that you can take knowledge, skills with understanding and apply those things when confronting new situations. The importance of highlighting these three goal types should be understood. How we acquire and remember facts is not identical to how we develop proficiency in a skill. How we teach for knowledge, and factual knowledge particularly, I can present it to you, I can have you read it in a book, I can have you write it 5 times, I can have you repeat it, I can have you use it in a sentence or use it in an example. I can teach you a mnemonic device. Those things will help you remember. If I want to teach you a skill, use a different teaching method. Skill teaching is typically involved introducing the skill, modeling it for the students, letting them try it in a very simple situation or circumstance and giving them feedback. And then skill teaching becomes increasing opportunities to use the skill in increasingly sophisticated situations. So my point is that even knowledge and skills differ in terms of how they're learned and how they're taught. They're also different in terms of how they're assessed. If I want to see if you know something or can remember something, I can give you a straightforward objective test, multiple choice, true, false, fill in the blank, to see if you know it or you don't. Knowledge is binary in that way. However, to assess your skill, what's the best assessment of a skill? Watch the student do the skill, or look at a product of their work, be it writing or drawing. And through your assessment of their doing or their product, you can determine their degree of proficiency. It's not right or wrong, it's here you are on a continuum from novice to expert. Now, the same points can be made about teaching for understanding. My view is that understanding can't be given. Understanding must be earned by the student. And the teacher's role then is to facilitate meaning making through using essential questions, through challenging issues and problems and texts, and supporting kids to make meaning. And transfer is, I believe, more like the game in athletics. You're going to think like a coach and prepare kids for the game, i.e. transferring their learning on the field or on the court, metaphorically. So these are big ideas in UBD that are embedded in stage 1 of the template. And once you're clear about those goal types, it impacts your assessment in stage 2, your teaching in stage 3. Now, one of the slides that's not in the set that I think you have received or will receive is related to an idea by Dr. John Hattie. I bet a lot of you have heard the name John Hattie. John is a New Zealander who spent 28 years of his career researching teaching and looking at the research in terms of the effect sizes of different instructional practices. And he's done an amazing synthesis of research described in his book, Visible Learning. I've gotten to know John and had dinner with him in Australia recently. And he shared with me an article that he had written. And here were the ideas in his article in a nutshell. John said, in all of my 28 plus years of studying, teaching, and learning, I believe we can think about 3 levels of learning. This surface level learning, where material is presented and the kids may get it, they may remember it for the test, but it may not be deep or lasting. He said, I contrast that with deep learning, which he defines, as I do, as learning for understanding, where you're learning big ideas in a deep way. And John proposes that the deepest learning prepares students for transfer. John's ideas are completely aligned with the ideas that Grant Wiggins and I have had for years in Understanding by Design. So I just wanted to put forth that idea. So let us look at some ideas in stages 2 and 3 briefly, and then the units. Stage 1 is where we identify our desired results according to those different goal types. Stage 2 now is where we ask people to think like assessors and ask the question, if these are the goals, these are the results, what evidence do we need? So a couple of quick thoughts about assessment. Being an amateur photographer, I'm drawn to this analogy. Think of assessment as like a photo album rather than a single snapshot. That just as an individual photo, an individual picture is like an assessment in that it's revealing, it gives us information. A single photo by itself is incomplete. And especially if it's a bad hair day, you may not want that photo to be representative of you. Say, no, take another one. But for assessment, similarly, any single assessment, any single measure succumbs to measurement error. And any single assessment is only assessing some things in a certain way. But because we have different goal types, and because assessment evidence is plural, we need to be thinking of assessment as a collection of pictures collected over time. Similarly, we wouldn't want the same picture again and again, multiple choice tests, multiple choice tests, multiple choice tests, because we have different goal types. We might have multiple choice test pictures to see if kids know stuff, but we would have more performance-based assessments to see if they can apply, to get evidence of understanding and transfer. So that's the metaphor. How do we know we have the right assessments? Well, it's a backward design question. Your assessments should give evidence of your goals, all of the goals that you've identified in stage 1. If you say this is an important goal and worth teaching, then we should have some evidence of the extent to which students have learned it. Here's one of my favorite cartoons that reminds us of a big idea in UBD, alignment. We want to make sure that our assessments are giving us the right evidence based on our goals. Here's a quick non-example, kind of in line with the cartoon. In history and social studies, our standards tell us that critical thinking should be one of our goals. But if I'm looking at teachers' assessments of a history or social studies unit, and the assessments are only tests of factual knowledge about a historical period, I would be right to observe, well, one of your goals, critical thinking, is not evident in your assessment. That's not to say we don't have tests of factual knowledge in history. It is to say, if that's the only picture in your album, then don't pretend you're getting evidence of critical thinking, because you're not. We want to make sure that our assessments are well aligned. Here is a simple but really powerful strategy that we teach in workshops, and you don't need a workshop to do this. If you're planning a UBD unit, you've identified your goals in stage 1, and now you're in stage 2 and you're thinking about your assessment evidence, both performance assessments and other or supplementary. Here is how this technique works. You cover up stage 1 or don't show that screen to another teacher or a team and ask them, by only looking at the assessments of in your unit or what you plan to assess, ask if they can infer your goals. Do you see how that works? It's a really great alignment check. If someone looks at your assessments, your photo album, and they can assess or they can identify all of your goals without even seeing them, that's validating. That says, I think I have pretty good alignment. Sometimes what happens is they look at your assessments and they can infer some, but not all of your goals. Well, that's important feedback, because that says to you, either I have too many goals and I'm really not assessing them all, or I really need something to assess this goal because it's not evident. So that's a simple but really powerful feedback system that you can use very informally. Ask a colleague to look at your planned units and see if they can tell you what your goals are. Now, since this is understanding by design, permit me to share a couple of ideas about assessing understanding. Grant Wiggins and I propose a judicial analogy that you see on the screen. We're going to presume the student is innocent of understanding, but what will convict them? How should we know, or how will we know? Well, much of our book has been written about the question, what is understanding and how is it assessed? Since our time is short, I'll give you a short, but I hope practical response to that question. My contention is, when we want to see if kids really understand, our assessments have to have 2 parts at least. We have to have part of the assessment that asks students to apply their learning. Typically, a performance task is best suited for this. But we just don't want them to do something or make a product or give an answer. They have to explain it. They have to show their work, reveal their reasoning, justify their answer with support from the text, and so on. Therefore, the kinds of assessments that give us evidence of understanding and transfer would be the ones that would be prompted with verbs like these. Apply your knowledge of area and perimeter to develop a design with maximum area. Critique this experimental design to see if there's any flaws in its conclusions. Teach someone else. would be an example of a task involving explanation. Again, there's a place for more traditional assessments of knowledge and skills because those are goals that we seek. But when understanding and transfer our goals, my contention is we need performance-based assessments that involve application and explanation so that we can truly convict them of understanding if they demonstrate it through their performance. The UBD template in stage 2 is quite basic. It has 2 elements or categories: a place for performance tasks, where we would see application and explanation, and other or supplementary evidence, where we would have other assessment evidence tied to our goals. And this is where we might have traditional tests, quizzes, skill checks, observations, and so on. But here's an important point in stage 2. The assessment evidence we collect here is really meant to be evaluative. In other words, if you're in a school that gives grades, and most do, how do we determine grades? It's on performance on these evaluative assessments. Some people call them summative assessments, but I don't want to imply that they only come at the end. It could come earlier, but this is the evidence that we're going to use to answer the question, how well have students learned the goals we've set out for them to learn? And if you have to grade, your grading is derived from the results of these assessments in stage 2. That's different from formative assessment, which is part of stage 3, where the assessment's purpose is to give feedback to teachers and students, not to evaluate their performance. So let's finish up with some quick thoughts about stage 3. Stage 3 is the learning plan. This is where we plan our instruction, what kids are going to be doing day to day. But my contention is the best lessons and the best learning activities are planned backward with clarity about the different goals we're after and mindful of the assessments that are ahead of us. So these 3 goal types become important. How we teach and the learning experiences we plan for students should be directly derived from these goals. When understanding is in our mix, understanding must be earned by students. Therefore, students need to be actively engaged in making meaning. And that's different than the teacher just telling you stuff. The teacher's role shifts to more of a facilitator, a questioner, playing devil's advocate, saying, well, let's try a different perspective on that. These are the instructional moves that help kids make meaning and deepen understanding. I can explain it to you, but I can't understand it for you. What a lovely thought. On a pillowcase, no less. Put that under your head at night and you'll remember that perhaps. So let me wrap this up. Think about transfer as like the game in athletics. Every game is different and the players have to take everything they've learned in practice and put it together on the field or on the court. And they have to do it on their own. Coach can't come out and play for you. The players have to do it on their own. So if you think about your curriculum and your learning goals in terms of the games you want kids to play, in other words, the transfer performances you're after, then think like a coach. Because think about the best coaches. There's clearly knowledge. You can't play the game if you don't know the rules, and you got to learn the rules. There are skills, both individual and team skills, and a lot of practice is working on the skills. But there are also understandings, also known as game strategy. And the best coaches help the players understand the game. But just marching through the playbook is not the goal of the coach. That's a coverage mentality. The coach has a performance mentality. We're planning for authentic performance, and we're planning backward with the players we have, developing their knowledge, their skills, and their understandings, always coaching with the game in mind. So that's a very short, but hopefully interesting look at some of the big ideas of UBD. Let me jump now to the units. And I think in our time available, I'll probably just highlight one but the other two, science and ELA, are available, and Kelsey will let you know how to get those, or they'll be emailed to you. So I'm going to shift. Let me see how I do this. Oops. I'll do it this way. I'm going to shift my screen to actually show the UBD template. And this is a PDF printed out version, which came right from Eduplanet, which is a nice feature. Anything you enter in the software can be printed out in a very nice form in the UBD template. So I worked with a couple of educators who were teaching virtually in the spring and wanted to address the issue of the pandemic. So this is, I call it a humanities unit because even though it's primarily English language arts skills, it does bring in some social studies. So this was a design for secondary students, upper middle school through high school. And you can read the summary here. But interesting, when we thought about, or when they thought about transfer goals, they were actually thinking about broader goals, ones that really cut across grade levels. And so you can see in the screen here, one of the goals was for students to locate and critically evaluate information from various sources. And a second primary goal in this unit is communicating ideas with a particular purpose and audience. So notice that the COVID pandemic is not the transfer goal. It's a topic we're going to explore to build transfer capacities. And by the way, these were derived right from the anchor standards and the grade level standards from the English Language Arts Common Core, which are reflected in many state and provincial standards. Now notice that underneath that, there is a place for desired understandings and essential questions. Let me see if I can do the highlighter here. So an understanding we want kids to come to. Information must be evaluated critically to determine its accuracy, completeness, and whether it's biased or not. Look at this lovely companion essential question. How do I know what to believe in what I see, hear, and read? That's a great question. It undergirds critical thinking, and it's not tied just to 8th grade or 10th grade. I want to start this in 1st and 2nd grade and use this again and again. It's an essential question that runs through the curriculum. The second question is really tied to social studies. The patterns of history often repeat. By studying the past, we can get insight into the present and be better prepared to face the future. And it's an essential question. Well, why should we study history? That's just old stuff, huh? What can we learn from the past? Well, we see it playing out daily. We are learning about pandemic by studying the Spanish flu, H1N1, SARS, Ebola. We're even learning from other countries as they flatten the curve in different ways, and we're looking at their public policies that have helped or hindered that goal. And a third understanding relates to communication and the idea of tying your communication to a clear purpose and audience. How does my audience and my purpose influence how I communicate? That's another great essential question. In this unit, there are more specific knowledge and skill objectives. And notice in this case, the knowledge is really topic specific to the pandemic, both bringing in some idea from science about viruses, how they mutate and their effects on humans, data that could be looked at through mathematics or statistical lens about the pandemic, including the concept of exponential growth, and then back to history, looking at different ways in which humans have tried to mitigate prior pandemic spreads. The skills are more specific and they're tied directly to the transfer goals: research, critical evaluation, and communication. Now, the details of how specific the skills would be and what instruction would be needed would, of course, be determined by the experience of the students and prior knowledge that they had, or their skill level, if you will. Just like coaches take the players they have each season and work with them, teachers do the same. You got to know where your students are, in other words, to know the best approach to skill development. Let's look in stage 2 briefly. There are 2 performance tasks in this unit, and these are interesting and timely, and notice they're tied to the long-term goals. The first one, as the students have researched and gathered information about the pandemic and about prior attempts to control pandemics, they are tasked with developing a public service announcement to inform people in their community, or it could be the world, because notice at the end, your PSA can be produced in the form of a podcast, a poster, a TED Talk, a radio TV spot, a newspaper article, or you can even propose another way. So this has several points to make. It allows student voice and choice, even though they're all working on the same thing, to research and communicate information. Secondly, the idea that your medium should support your message for your audience. Maybe your audience is younger kids, so you're going to do a picture book or a pictograph versus an editorial that might be appropriate for adults. Notice also in the task, include at least one misconception or inaccurate claim that you found in your research and explain why it's wrong. So the people that say, wearing masks violates my individual freedom, or I don't believe in vaccines. Well, those things are out there, but you've got to be a critical consumer, and that's part of the goal of the unit. I won't go into it, you can read it on your own, but there are specific success criteria identified. This could be done with the students or it could be presented to them in advance. They ought to know what they're working toward. They ought to know what a quality PSA looks like, so as they're working on theirs, they can self-assess, even as a teacher will use those criteria in evaluation. The second performance task is an interesting one, offered by the Khan Academy, the online learning database that Saul Khan has created. And they actually have a Breakthrough Junior Challenge. And in this case, students are invited to work in teams, so it could be a collaborative task, or it could be done individually as well if kids are home, where they have to make a 3-minute video, kind of a TED Talk, to explain one of the big ideas related to the pandemic. And in this case, they're given a list of possible categories on their challenge website, and then they actually submit their video for a worldwide audience and judges. Talk about authentic, talk about use of contemporary media while still allowing voice and choice, requiring research, critical thinking, communication skills. Very rich. There's some other evidence that could be obtained, and here's one possibility that's an interesting one.
Looks like we lost Jay for a minute. We'll give him a chance to log back in.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Hey Jenna, Jay just gave me a call too. He said his internet went out, so he's just rebooting the computer right now. But if it's helpful, I'm happy to go and do the product overview real quick, and then we can roll in the remainder of the presentation.
That's a great idea. Why don't you start sharing and do that?
Sure, no problem at all. All right, give me 1 second here. All right, guys, just while we're waiting for Jay, I'll go ahead and kind of get this out of the way, for lack of a better term. But you saw what an export looks like out of our platform. What I'm going to do is just give you a couple of quick highlights as to different features that are helpful for the platform, especially if you're trying to get started with UBD or if you've been using it for a long time. So right here in the background, you'll get a quick view of kind of what Unit Planner looks like. Couple key things. One is that these units are designed to be collaborative. You'll see the share button in the top left-hand corner here. And if I go to the next slide, I can share units with any of the folks within my school or district, which is really, really helpful. I'm going to back up for just a second. One of the other big, oh, okay, my computer wants to do that. One of the other biggest things, and I'm going to hint on this in just a couple minutes too, is that if you are familiar with UBD, and even just from Jay's presentation there, you should see that how the platform supports the 3 stages of understanding by design. So it's going to walk you through determining your learning goals in stage 1, which includes your standards, your long-term transfer goals, your understandings, etc. Then it's going to roll into your assessment evidence. So that could include performance tasks and any other formative summative assessments there. And then finally getting into your learning plan here in stage 3. And you'll see kind of what that looks like. So if I move past the sharing abilities, the next thing I want to talk to is standards alignment. So I know that this is something, if you guys are planning your units right now in Google Drive or Microsoft Word, you're probably struggling with this piece a little bit just because it's so cumbersome to try to keep track of when you're using a word processor or even a spreadsheet. So our platform does make that very easy. We have most national and state standard sets already available within the platform. Also, if you're working with any school or district specific standard sets, we can get those in there for you too. So it's very easy. All I'll do is select a standard set and my subject area grade level that corresponds, and all of my standards will populate just below, and I can select whatever applies to this particular unit. Below that, I talked about being a guided process for UBD. So you're going to see as I scroll further down that screen, I have an area to build out my long-term transfer goals, my understandings, essential questions, and just below that is my knowledge and skills. And even if you're not super familiar with UBD, the platform is going to guide you along. So what kinds of long-term independent accomplishments are desired? You know, what do we want our kids to understand? And what thought-provoking questions are going to foster inquiry? So it's very easy as, again, as you're digging into understanding by design and trying to build out these units of study, make sure that you're doing that, you know, according to the UBD design process. Aside from that, I mentioned the alignment to standards and how cumbersome that can be in a Google Docs or Microsoft Word, but our platform does have what we call a built-in unit alignment check. So these elements of understanding by design, you know, aligning your learning goals, your long-term transfer goals, understandings, etc. We know it can be cumbersome. What we do is actually have a check that pulls your stage 1 on the left. So I can take a look at all of the standards and all of the learning outcomes that I've identified for this unit in stage 1 on the left-hand side. And over to the right, I can see, do I have a corresponding assessment in stage 2? And do I have a lesson activity ready in stage 3? If I do, it'll show me a green box, tells me where I did that in performance task 1 or performance task 3. If not, I get a red box, which tells me I have a gap and need to go back and make some changes. So this can be really, really helpful for you as you're building out these units and really just give you a little bit of insight as to how you are intentionally teaching to and assessing for these items. On kind of a larger scale, the analytics is a big, big piece of the platform, both for teachers and for leaders. So our platform does have the ability to look at all of the standards within a standard set and see, have I taught to each of these that I need to, and have I assessed for each of these things? What you're looking at right now is Common Core and Social Studies grade 6 standards. And I can see those broken down here on the left. And from these blue tiles, I can see in how many units have I taught to this particular standard. And if I click on that, for example, this standard says I taught to it in 2 units. And if I were to click on that, I'd be able to dig into that even further and see, okay, and I've also assessed it twice, and these are what those assessments look like, and I've taught to it in one unit, and this is what this looks like, in one lesson activity, I'm sorry. And aside from that, and possibly even in a bigger thing to keep in mind just as you're digging into understanding by design, we do have what we call our UBD Institute. So this was written by Jay. It contains 9 learning paths, which are basically self-paced online courses. They are asynchronous, and it's very helpful for your staff to go through. Gives you just a really good baseline understanding of what UBD is, and digs into the 3 stages separately too. But it is 9 courses. I believe the total length of the course is somewhere around 17 hours. And it's a combination of discussions, reflections, assessments, a lot of videos that Jay's developed. And then you can host global discussions with folks all around the world, as well as within your own school or district. And there are resource libraries built in as well. So that's something that I'm more than happy to help anybody with that may be interested. All right, so I'm gonna stop sharing for a second. Let's see, Jay, it looks like you made it back.
I am back. We had a power blackout and had to reboot.
All right, well, I'll turn it back over to you then.
Thank you, Kelsey, for just stepping in. We have a few minutes, and I'd be happy to respond to questions. Although when my computer shut out and I had to reboot, I lost the link to the question chat box. So I don't know if Jenna
Jay,
saw any of the questions, or if anybody wants to put questions in now. I'll do my best in the few minutes we have left to respond.
Hey, Jay, it's Jenna. There are no current questions. So anybody, if you do have questions, please go ahead and add them into the chat box, and we'll go ahead. Jay should be able to see them now. It just won't kind of give him the history since he re-logged in. Either people are typing or you did such a fantastic job of explaining it to all of us that we're all now brilliant.
I like to think it was crystal clear. I would take a moment just for a little plug, but for the good of the order. And in fact, let me, if you don't mind, let me share my screen one more time, and I will show you some resources that are new that may be of interest, especially as the summer is here and people sometimes like to do reading in their summer time off, quote, but now we've been off for a long time for many of us. So very quickly, I'm going to show you several resources that are now accessible. Are you able to see my screen now, which is my website?
Looks good, Jay.
Yes.
All right, this is my website. This is the home page with my older brother pictured. And when you scroll across the top, under books and DVDs, there are 4 new books that may be of interest that tie into a lot of detail under the hood of UBD. In terms of, in reverse order, one is a recent book for designing authentic performance tasks and projects. And the subtitle is Tools for Meaningful Learning and Assessment. My view is an authentic performance task or project can be a rich assessment, particularly of transfer. But these things are also rich learning experiences. And I think a good task or project kind of blurs the line between learning and assessment. As you're working on a task or project, you are learning things, you are synthesizing, you are refining your skills. But yes, we can step back and assess kids as they work on these as well. So that's a very specific book with lots of tools. A second recent book is one I'm very proud of, and this really fits in stage 3 of backward design. Teaching for Deeper Learning, Tools to Engage Students in Meaning Making. Understanding must be earned. And this book is the most specific and practical set of tools and strategies for engaging kids in active meaning making to come to understand. These are both from ASCD. A third book I wrote with a colleague, a friend of mine, Dr. Judy Willis. Judy is an MD. She's a neurologist, spent over 25 years in private neurology practice, and then took a leave of absence, went back to school and got a master's in education and became a teacher. And Judy taught for 10 years, second grade, primarily emphasizing reading, fifth grade, all subjects, and then middle school mathematics. She's not only very, very smart, but she understands the brain and learning and actually references the research on neuroscience and how it really fits and supports the ideas of UBD. Or I should say it the other way around. The ideas of understanding by design support what we know about the brain and learning. The last book I'll highlight, even though they're more on the list, is a book that's really intended for school and district leaders. And this includes teacher leaders, but who are interested in having what I'll call a curriculum and assessment system, not just planning individual units, pardon me, not just planning individual units, but really having what I call a curriculum and assessment blueprint that has orchestrated plan for building units across the grades, having recurring essential questions, and having maps of performance tasks that give us evidence of student growth. So if you're interested in the bigger picture of curriculum, that book is perfect. So these are all on my website. The first three are from ASCD. Leading Modern Learning, the fourth book is from Solution Tree. So I apologize for the shameless plug, but if you're interested in this topic, these are the current and very practical books, and I'm proud to share them with you. So I'm going to turn this back to Jenna, since it looks like our time is about wrapping up. I'm going to stop sharing and
great. We did have one question that came, well, two questions. One, can you hear me?
Yes.
Am I unmuted? Yes. Somebody asked when you're coming to Maine.
When I'm coming to Maine, when the pandemic is over. I love Maine any time of the year.
There you go. And the other question, your example was for high school, but are there units for lower elementary?
Well, there are many units that primary grade teachers have created using UBD. Unfortunately, for the pandemic examples, we actually have 3 units, and I believe Kelsey will email them, or through Jenna will email them to you. The one I showed, which was for secondary, is a science unit that was particularly oriented toward a biology class. And then there's more of a social studies unit, but still secondary. That's not to say that some primary teachers haven't been working with the pandemic topic, but I don't happen to know those. They weren't in UBD. But I would say UBD could be used certainly to plan for units of almost any grade. So thanks for the question.
Perfect, wonderful. Okay, well then I just want to thank both Kelsey and Jay. I know we're at the top of the hour again, so I'm going to wrap things up here. Kelsey, if you could go ahead and share those last 2 slides I gave you. So I want to thank both Kelsey and Jay so much for today, for the understanding, for the lesson. That was awesome. And I am posting into the chat window right now some links, some information and some links. The first one is that PDH link that we talked about earlier today. Go ahead and click that, and that bit.ly there, and that will get you started on the forms to fill out. On the screen, you're going to see next week's Wednesday webinar, Reimagine Professional Learning with Habits of Mind. This is another one sponsored by Eduplanet, one of our partners. Thank you so much, Eduplanet, for all that you do. So if you would like to sign up for that webinar, the third link in what I just posted is the IDEA Illinois /calendar, and that's where you'll find all of our events and can sign up for any of those. And then on that last slide there, Kelsey, we are excited to announce our new IDEA Youth Summer Institute. This is going to be a virtual conference held July 15th through 17th. We're taking registration right now. Idea U, it starts with you, even though it ends with you, but we won't go there. But anyhow, it starts with you from the perspective of our entire conference is focused on SEL and equity. So all of our sessions are going to be focused on those topics, and we will have about 30 sessions over the 3-day time period. So go to our website at bit.ly/IdeaU2020 and check that out, and we would love to see you there July 15th through the 17th. Let's see, we got some more messages here before I let you guys go. Just want to make sure there's no questions. Lots of thank yous, and thank yous to Jay. Learned so much. Thank you, everybody. Perfect.